In more than half a century since the end of the Second World War, there have been just a handful of truly great Wagner sopranos. Kirsten Flagstadt, who first came to prominence in New York and London in the 30s, her successor at the Met, Helen Traubel, and two singers who between them helped to create and then sustain the post-war Wagner revival, first at the New Bayreuth and then all over the world, Birgit Nielsen, and last but by no means least, Astrid Varnay, who's my guest today. Madame Varnay, you're shortly to celebrate your 80th birthday, and you've been writing your memoirs to coincide with this milestone, which, of course, is a reflection on not only a career devoted to singing Wagner, but also Richard Strauss, Verdi, and a surprisingly large number of contemporary roles as well. But yours is an extraordinary career because for a lot of people, they steadily work their way up to stardom. For you, one moment you were Astrid Who, and the next moment you were on the front page of the New York Times after a dramatic debut at the Met, despite the fact that your debut coincided with the Japanese invasion of Pearl Harbor. How did this come about?
Well, I happen to have been in the Metropolitan at the right time when there was a dearth of singers who usually came to the Metropolitan to sing, like Frida Leider, for instance, and even Kirsten Flagstadt was not able to come because she wanted to stay with her husband.
Who was in Norway.
Who was in Norway. I actually was engaged at the Metropolitan to sing Wagner at the age of 23 to do the role of Elsa, because Edward Johnson, who was the general manager at the time, was trying to find out whom he could place in the Wagnerian wing. I had sung for him, and it would have taken about almost a year before I had the possibility of doing this. And I was being coached by Mr. Leinsdorf, and came in on a Friday and asked him, "What are we doing?" Because he looked so skeptical. And I said, "Well, I think we should be doing Elsa." And he said, "Well, I would like very much for you to go through the role of Sieglinde, to mark it. In other words, not to sing full voice." I felt it was strange. And then when I was finished, I was sent up to costume and makeup. And then the penny dropped, and I realized that I would have to replace Madame Lehmann, who became ill.
Lotte Lehmann, who was going to be singing
yes.
in Sieglinde in Act 1, of course, of Walkure, alongside Lauritz Melchior, perhaps the greatest Wagner tenor of the age, and probably of any age.
Well, we standees, we reverenced him for years, and to sing with Lauritz Melchior was like having the greatest prize given to one.
Because when you say standees, you were one of the
group
of students that stood at the back of the performance.
And the Golden Horseshoe, we paid $1 to come in and stood our legs, so to speak, up to our heads, so in order just to hear Madame Flagstadt and Lauritz Melchior together.
I mean, Astrid, walking out there in this large house, full, no doubt, to overflowing, I mean, what did it feel like?
You know, I was so busy trying to get myself calm for this opera. I knew what was going on because I had seen the Walkure so many times, and I knew what Mr. Melchior was going to do, and I just felt in a sort of a dream. But I had enough sense to say, now, stay cool. You can really feel better at the end of the opera if you stay cool, and I did. Because I asked one of the assistants to please pace the stage with me, at least that. I came to the stage about 15-20 minutes earlier in order to find my way on the stage, even though I had seen the set and I had seen the scenery and the work that they did with the people in Wagnerian operas as a standee. And I knew almost every movement that Mr. Melchior was going to do. And also looking at the props. And what gave me a tremendous feeling was this big hulk of a man who then appeared and said, "Mach's gut, ich bin da für dich." Sort of like, "I'm here for you." I cannot remember exactly anything that was tremendous in it at the moment. At the end of the opera, when I was taking my makeup off, all of a sudden my knees started to shake. And that, of course, showed how excited and how I was immersed in the opera itself.
What do you think that your friends, who were probably still standing there for your performance, thought when someone who'd been in line with them suddenly comes out on the stage?
They didn't know that I was studying. I was a standee for them. They knew that I loved opera, and I never told them because I didn't know what was going to happen with my life as a singer. I didn't want to be a singer in the beginning. I wanted to be a concert pianist. And there was one girl who absolutely was floored and came to the dressing room at the end of the opera and just stood with her mouth agape. And she says, "It's really you?" And I said, "Yes," and we embraced, but it was really fascinating.
Now, this performance on the 6th of December 1941 was being transmitted
Yes.
on nationwide radio, so we actually have got a recording of it. Indeed, it's been issued on CDs, and many people regard it as one of the finer recordings of Die Walkure. So let's hear the end of Act 1. From Du bist der Lenz, you are
Yes.
the Spring, Astrid Varnay is Sieglinde, Lauritz Melchior is Siegmund, and the orchestra of the Metropolitan Opera is conducted by Erich Leinsdorf. That was the end of Act One of Die Walkure. Astrid Varnay, my guest today, was Sieglinde, and Sigmund was Lauritz Melchior, and the orchestra of the Metropolitan Opera was conducted by Eric Leinsdorf, a live performance marking Miss Varnay's debut on the 6th of December 1941. Madame Varnay, sparing your blushes, what did the critics have to say?
Well, very many were favorable. In fact, I think almost everybody was. They claimed the voice was carrying, but they praised my acting much more than the voice at the time. I can understand that. Someone said that just sitting still made an impression on them. I evidently had a personality which I was not aware of at the time.
Because we have to bear in mind that after this baptism of fire, within a few days,
6 days,
literally 6 days,
6 days
Helen
later,
Traubel cancels
That's right.
Brünnhilde, and you're in that as well.
Absolutely, because there was nobody to do the Brünnhilde. At least the Sieglinde could have been done by 2 or 3 other people who were not able to jump in because they were neither present or had sung the day before. But for the Brünnhilde there was nobody, and it was either sink or swim. So it was quite a thrilling moment. The second performance was even more moving for me than the first, because in the second performance I was really put on my mettle in that heavy dramatic role.
Yeah.
And my voice was a very good carrying sound over the orchestra, but Leinsdorf didn't in any way favor me. He felt either the girl had to hold her own, and still it sounds to me in this recording very lyrical. The ripeness came later.
Leaving that to the future, here you are, you're 23. Suddenly you become a
Yes.
star overnight, singing 2 of the most testing Wagner roles. How did you come to be in a position to do this? You came from a musical family, of
I
course.
came from singers' family. My father was a dramatic tenor, my mother a coloratura soprano. And I inherited from both of them. From my mother, the carrying sound, which she gave to me in her technical teaching, and the coloratura gave me an agility. And I assumed that from my father I had that dramatic sound because he sang everything from the Duke in Rigoletto to Tannhäuser.
And you were born in Scandinavia
I was
when
born
they were
in-
running an opera house.
Yes, I was born in Stockholm, and then they moved to Norway. And in Norway, my father, by chance, had an acquaintance there who was a Hungarian. They did what was called the opera-comique. And in this opera-comique, the family of Kirsten Flagstad played a great part in it. Mother was the chorus mistress, brother played the cello, the father translated the German operas into Norwegian, and Kirsten Flagstad all of a sudden appeared, and she was really a slip of a girl. One wouldn't believe it.
See, one of the things reading your autobiography
Yes.
that astonished me was that we, who know her as the mature artist, only think of her as having one of the largest voices there's ever been, singing all the heavy Wagner roles, as of course you yourself later did. How did this transformation come about?
Well, it sometimes happens when women bear a child. Her whole anatomy changed. The voice became stronger. In fact, her mother, Madame Flagstad's mother, claimed that there was a miracle that happened. Her voice was fuller, warmer, and started in this line of dramatic soprano. I'm sure that when she sang Amelia in the Ballo in Maschera, that her fullness was not yet there, and then in the German wing, she developed even more. Because always, when I heard Flagstad's voice, there was this overtones, these marvelous overtones, which gave the voice a silvery quality. And this silvery quality she had from the very first time all the way to the end of her life.
Now, life is full of strange coincidences. You're, as it were, brought up alongside the Flagstad family, and then your family end up in New York. You're a teenager in New York in the mid-30s, and Flagstad comes in 1935, fresh from success
Yes.
at Bayreuth in 1933, and starts singing the big roles in New York to considerable acclaim. In the years between her arrival in 1935 and going off back to Norway during the war, because her husband
Yes.
was a prominent businessman in Norway, and she elected to be with him rather than staying on in New York. Did you hear her a lot? Was she something of a
yes.
heroine to you?
Oh, yes, definitely. She was my idol. My mother had contacted her because they knew each other for quite some time. And Mother contacted her, and she was very glad to get together. And in fact, my mother wanted her advice on me, and so we visited her, but the lady started to talk about the old times, and I never did get to sing for her. That happened much later. And from 1935 onward, I listened to what she did on stage avidly. I remember a tremendous personality. Flagstad at that time had gained quite some weight. And in those days, Wagner singers really had to have strength, and trying to diet was not a good thing. And Flagstad with Melchior were the idols of all of us standees.
Now, one of the roles in which Kirsten Flagstad took New York by storm was Isolde.
Oh,
and,
yes.
Let's hear Kirsten Flagstad, one of the earliest recordings she made in 1935 in New York, the year of her debut at the Met, with the Victor Orchestra, conducted by Hans Lang, in Isolde's Liebestod. That was Isolde's Liebestod, Kirsten Flagstadt, with the Victor Orchestra, conducted by Hans Lang, a recording made at the beginning of Flagstadt's New York career in September 1935. Madame Varnay, your parents, of course, were in Scandinavia as part of this, of really the disruptions that happened in Europe, consequent upon the First World War.
Yes.
And throughout the years that you were growing up, of course, Europe was in various kinds of chaos with people being
Absolutely.
dispossessed and displaced. How did you get to New York from Scandinavia?
Well, after my father had given 3 years of his life in preparing the opera comique, they didn't have much money, the company there, the opera comique, and there was one man who turned out to be one of these angels of opera who didn't have the money, even though he claimed that he did. So they had to shut that off. And my parents then went to South America, where my father gave the first magic flute ever to have been given in Buenos Aires. And mother had sung there. And from there, being at that hemisphere, my father felt, why not go to New York and present my mother to the Metropolitan Opera? And they asked for an audition. She sang an audition. But they didn't have any room for her at that time, because they were about 5 coloratures. And they said, come back some other time. She did sing with other small opera companies in New York. There were these small opera companies who imported the Italian singers, and mother really was more for the Italian operas. Unfortunately, after we had been there about a half a year, my father passed away and my mother remained in America.
And he was then a young man, still only in his 30s.
He was 35 years old when he died.
Yeah, terrible.
It's a pity. I often asked my mother later on why she never returned to Hungary, where she had her people, and found out that at that time communism was beginning, and she felt if she had gone back, who knows what would have happened. So politics was a part of the reason why I became a singer.
And your mother never really thrust herself forward, so although she was respected as a teacher, she never really had that solo career in New York.
You know, people in Europe find it not a very good manners to force themselves. And mother didn't have this feeling of going and asking again for an invitation.
But she taught singing, and of course
she
you
taught
were one
singing,
of her pupils.
and I was her pupil.
When did you realize you had a voice? I mean, not just a voice, but a special voice.
I went to school, and then we went, my friends and I, to vocalize for the chorus. And there, Mr. Schwartz heard me. He was the musical head of the faculty there. And he asked for my mother to come. And I thought, heaven knows what I've done wrong. And when we got there, he claimed that he felt that my voice had a special sound and I should learn to sing. Mother thought it was too soon to teach me, because she felt that a body should mature.
How old were you then?
Oh, I was about 16, 17, and she felt a little bit later would be better. But Mr. Schwartz was adamant, and she started teaching me.
And then at a certain point, I think your mother realized that you needed to move on to another teacher, and that's where I think Hermann Weigert, then an assistant conductor at the Met, entered your life. And of course, as we know, you subsequently married him, and he was one of the great influences on your life and career.
Absolutely. Mother was a very intelligent woman. She knew that she could teach me the Italian things,
but she couldn't do
the Wagner. And also, being of a temperamental person that I was, not temperamental in the wrong sense, she felt I needed a stronger hand. Mother and I were invited to a birthday party where a man by the name of Douglas Beatty was a bass at the Metropolitan. And I had asked him what he was going to sing in the near future. He said, well, he would ask me to come. He sang one of the Giants, incidentally, in Rheingold. And he presented me with a place, and I was so immersed in this Rheingold because I had never seen anything like it. I thought Rheingold was a beer, and that was it. And all of the protagonists there were like the people that I had seen on stage in the legitimate theater. And this interested me very much. And I asked Douglas Beatty where he received this quality of delineation, of showing in the voice all of the various feelings that were in that role. And he mentioned this name of Hermann Weigert. And I went home to Mother and said, I think I found somebody who could teach me these things which my mother wanted me to learn. And so she wrote to Mr. Hermann Weigert, saying that she had this daughter who had a voice whom she believed would be of a Wagnerian quality, and sent it registered mail like people do in Germany, although he lived, let's say, about 25 blocks away. Anyway, somewhere along the way, I believe she mentioned that Flagstadt also had mentioned his name during one of their conversations. And I know that Weigert had called up Flagstadt to find out if we were bona fide. We then were able to get an audition at his place. And I must say this man was a real pedagogue. Mostly the people in the Metropolitan faculty who played piano just played the piano, gave the accompaniment, and pounded the rolls or coached persons by banging the roll with a piano.
But he could tell you all about
he could tell
Wagner
all of,
and
that's
really
right.
some of the philosophical underpinnings.
That's
of
right.
the, of
He
the
really
work.
had given 25 years of his life already to study about Wagner, so he was really a connoisseur of it. Every single sentence I came to him and said, what does this really mean? And he gave me an outline, but he also allowed me to ask questions, because I always felt that acting was a part of the opera too, and I hadn't had too much of acting on that stage of the Met. Oh yes, there were a few people who were good actors, but the majority of people sang. In those days at the Metropolitan, the main thing was to sing. All of the acting came much later. And he really gave me the answers. He knew Wagner inside and outside. He did say, it's all there in the score. It's all in the words. Of course, Wagner's words in his operas are sometimes very difficult to understand. But I spoke German ever since I was a little child. And between him and my mother taking care of the vocal angle of it still, and working with Mr. Weigert twice a week, and I worked by myself. I did my homework until 3 or 4 in the morning sometimes, in any kind of a season, to be prepared. Mother always said, you can't open up a shop without material in order to sell it. And Weigert helped me sell it.
Now, jumping ahead just a little to just an illustration of your powers as a mature Wagner singer, of course, one of your Ring performances at Bayreuth that was recorded was a 1953 Ring conducted by Clemens Krauss. There are those for whom that is their favorite performance of the whole cycle. One of the things that Weigert impressed upon you was the need to respect Wagner's precise markings. And I think there's a good illustration of that with the very first phrases that Brunhilde sings in the entire cycle in Act 2 of Walkure. Let's just hear those opening passages. And of course, Wotan is Hans Hotter, and the orchestra of the Bayreuth Festival is conducted by Clemens Krauss, recordings made in the summer of 1953.
Zum Haupt, den Fels umfließe sie sich, und den Fels ist, wie man gehört, nach Valhalla, taugte mir nicht. Umristet von Haus, alter Zerfall.
bitte gespannt. Hey, wie die goldene Kaiser geschwingt, die Abenteuer hebt sie vor Angst, hielt auf von die Rede, schlag mich weg zum Tag. In solcher Aussicht freut es mich gern, ewig auf mutiger Männer schlacht. Du musst sehen, den Sturm du bestehst, ich lustige Nasterchen stehst.
That was part of Act Two of Die Walkure, a recording made at the Bayreuth Festival in 1953. Astrid Varnay, my guest on Vintage Years today, was Brunhilde. Hans Hotter was Wotan, and the orchestra of the Bayreuth Festival was conducted by Clemens Krauss. By the time, of course, that recording was made, Hermann Weigert was not only your teacher, he was also, of course, your husband. When I look at the passages that in your book about your relationship with Weigert, I feel a deep sadness that a man of his great talent was robbed by fate of the career he deserved, perhaps not once but twice. First because the disruption in Europe meant he had to go to New York and maybe never quite established himself as the conductor, when we will see evidence later on that he was a very good conductor.
Absolutely.
And then just as he's re-establishing himself and conducting some performances in the early 50s. He dies of a heart attack while in his middle 60s. It's a sad story, and of course must be especially devastating for you.
It was very devastating, I must say that. I always felt the two of us were a product of Wagner. This sounds strange, but Wagner brought us together. And I felt the two of us could do things in Bayreuth, which we did. He was taken by the Wagner brothers as a mentor, or let's say someone they asked about certain things. Even though the brothers Wieland and Wolfgang knew the essence and the qualities of Richard Wagner, here was a man who had taken the qualities of Richard Wagner and put them into action. And these boys were still very young to take over the Festspiele.
Yes, because they're in their early 30s.
That's
and
right.
He's, of course, in his late 50s, early 60s at that time.
And at that
yes.
time, he was able to be a counselor. And it was wonderful to be there together. And after he passed away, I felt this feeling I would have to vindicate him somewhere along the way. I didn't take time out. I continued. I missed him very much during that performance of the Hollander, which I had to sing at the time.
In 1955,
That's
was.
right.
Yes.
And somewhere along the way, he hovered around. I feel that those people who leave us physically are with us on a different plane. Because many times when I didn't know what to do in a case of an agency or in a case of singing where I was a little leery about something, I would say, what would you have done? And words which he never spoke to me about it came to me in my mind, as if the spirit of Weigert was still with me.
Now, fortunately for all of us, you did make some recordings with him in the early 50s,
Yes.
mainly in Germany. And we're going to end this afternoon's program with one of your favorites, the immolation scene, of course, at the end of Götterdämmerung, which actually won the Grand Prix du Disque.
Yes, I was very happy about it.
In Paris. But we'll come to that. But also, I think, in 1953, with the Bavarian Radio Orchestra, you recorded the great Act 3 duet from Aida with George London as Amonasro. How easy did you find it making the transition from Wagner roles to Verdi?
I did it the other way around. I had studied the Verdi operas with my mother before I studied the Wagnerian. Unfortunately, at the Metropolitan, the various departments were either an Italian department where all of the Italians sang, and the German repertoire was sung by people who were either Scandinavian or Germans.
And never the twain would meet.
The twain would meet. And I feel that anybody who has studied the Italian language and also the voice placement that the Italians use has a great advantage when he sings Wagner. Both things have to be sung. And I believe that today, especially, if one listens to the people who sing in Bayreuth, one finds a few people who have that Italianate quality, and it gives a special flavor to the Wagnerian singing.
Now, George London was very much in his vocal prime.
Oh,
then.
fabulous.
Again, a singer who perhaps died prematurely. I think he must have been, around 60 when he died, rather tragically,
Yes.
of a long and lingering illness. And so he's perhaps not as well remembered today as he might have been. What are your memories of George London as an artist?
Well, I think so. Any time I mention George London to any of the people that are younger than I, they have listened to him, and he was loved in Vienna. He was really the person, and also singing in Bayreuth, the Holländer. Whatever he did was artistic.
Sposa felice, lui che amasti tanto, tripode insieme, potrai gioir.
Un giorno solo disse dolce incanto, una di tal gioia e poi morir,
Rammenti che noi ligi suoi piedi, le case, i templi e la letto farò, tra sé ceppi, vergini rapite, quadri, vecchi, fagioli e trucido. Stai con quel nostro, poi pronto già, vittoria avrem. Solo a saper mi resta, qual se fieri nemico seguirà.
scoprirlo potria, ti fai.
Tu stessa, qui attendi. E ama. E conduce gli gizi. Intendi?
Intendi consiglieto.
Tutti di sangue scorrono sulle città dei vinti, ed in penetri portici si levano gli estinti, via di palesse gridano, perché la patria amor. Una larva orribile fra l'ombre a noi s'affaccia, prema di scarne braccia sul capo tu elevò. Tua madre l'avvisola di maledire. Non sei mia figlia e fai tu sei la schiava.
That was an extract from Act 3 of Verdi's Aida. Aida was sung by Astrid Varnay, my guest on Vintage Years this afternoon, Amonasro by George London, and the Bavarian Radio Symphony Orchestra was conducted by Hermann Weigert, a recording made at the studios of Bavarian Radio on the 5th of October 1953. Astrid, when we left you, you were in New York in the early 40s, having shot to prominence singing first Sieglinde and then Brunhilde. And we know that, of course, you became one of the great stars of the new Bayreuth, which Wagner's grandsons founded in 1951. You find yourself as Brunhilde taken on trust, a remarkable thing. How did this happen?
Well, a question of financial problems. I was not able at that time to finance a trip just to sing an audition at Bayreuth. And I had asked one of the people there, either the brothers or somebody representing them, to come to the Maggio Fiorentino, which is the Florence festival, where I was going to do the Lady Macbeth. At first, Wieland Wagner wanted to come himself, but then was deterred for some reason. Maybe it was pretty good that he was deterred, because I don't know if he would have accepted me in the role of Lady Macbeth with an eye on Wagner. However, since they asked 28 people, especially Madame Flachstadt, they wanted to have Madame Flachstadt back. And she said no, she was advanced in years and she felt that more younger people should come there. And they asked her whom she would have in mind. And she named my name as having had a success in America, having sung many times there the Wagnerian roles. She felt that I was ready to come to Bayreuth.
Now, when you were singing in the Met, presumably these were traditional Wagner productions,
yes.
Helmets with horns.
That's right.
Skins,
Wonderful.
all that kind of thing. Great, yeah. But, I mean, so Wieland Wagner's settings must have been quite a shock to you. How did you cope?
No, it wasn't a shock to me. I expected that something would be different. And I must say, his idea of making the people who were the main roles human people, not only gods and goddesses, but bringing them closer to us, was easier without all of the frills and fancies that were on stage. Every tree had leaves on it. With all of the appurtenances, they had to do a lot of acting which was overacted in order to be seen on that stage. And in this way, having cleared the whole place of trees, of leaves, of boulders, only those things which were necessary, which were in the score, was kept. And the human person appeared clearer. What he wanted is to bring the essence of it, the real nitty-gritty, or let's say the basis of what Wagner was doing.
Now, the first ring cycle that you sang at Bayreuth was conducted by Herbert von Karajan, and you found that a difficult experience.
Well, he rehearsed it. I, at this moment, do not recall whether it was Knappertsbusch who did the first one.
I think Knappertsbusch did one, and Karajan
did the other.
Yes.
Yes. But Karajan rehearsed it at a certain tempo in rhythm, and then Knappertsbusch, being a person who had very much more broader rhythms, that was difficult for us. But I did one thing. There was a tenor who came to America, and I asked him about Knappertsbusch. This was Mr. Treptow. Mm-hmm. He said, breathe deeply.
Gunter Treptow, yes.
Don't take any short breaths unless you had to. Breathe deeply, because if he broadens it out, you're going to have to finish the sentence with breath, not without it. And the result was that my actual breathing capacity became greater under Knappertsbusch, because the muscles of my breathing chest grew, so to speak, stronger.
Now, Joseph Calbert is somebody
Yes.
who perhaps his reputation doesn't perhaps stand as high as Karajan and Knappertsbusch, but I think you enjoyed a long and fruitful association with him, not just at Bayreuth, but also at Munich, where at the time of his death he was the music director at
He was the
Opera
general orchestral musical director.
Yes.
Calbert had one thing which singers loved. He loved singers, and he accompanied them sometimes instead of just making them follow him. And this is something which even a great man like Mitropoulos said, we have to play tennis with one another. Mm-hmm. One serves, the other one catches it. This unison of endeavor. And Calbert had that.
He was a singer's conductor.
He was a singer's conductor,
yes.
Definitely.
Now, of course, one of the more interesting early productions at the New Bayreuth was the 1953 production of Lohengrin, which was recorded with Calbert, and of course you singing what has become, in many ways, your most celebrated role, Ortrud, which requires not only great vocal strength, but also formidable acting ability. She's an unsympathetic woman, but a very powerful, I mean, much more of a, what we'll call a finely drawn character, say, than Elsa.
Oh, those roles appealed to me. To quote Hotter, who once said of himself he was good in being bad. I enjoyed also being a bad girl on stage. It's something within us that one can act more. You take a Iago, for instance, in Othello's opera. I would have loved to sing Iago, except I didn't have the voice for it. And the same thing with Ortrud. It fit my voice, first of all, at that time when the voice grew, because there was quite a number of years before I sang really an Ortrud with quality. And with each conductor, there was a difference in it. And I do not consider Ortrud being bad or unsympathetic. That's the audience's viewpoint. I had to believe myself as being in the right.
She represented the good old ways of doing
The
things.
good old ways of doing it, the heathen
Yes.
ways, and these Christian people come and try to usurp my place. This I wouldn't want.
Well, here, let's have an extract from that 1953 Bayreuth recording of Lohengrin. I've chosen the beginning of Act 2, where you're putting a bit of steel into Friedrich von Telramund, sung
Yes.
by Hermann Uder, an artist who died tragically young at the age of
Yes.
52. But again, if one looks at the people who were the pillars on which the new Bayreuth was constructed,
He was one of them.
He was undoubtedly one of them.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little about him.
Well, he was a wonderful friend. He gave all of his qualities on stage, sometimes too much feeling. I was trained to use my voice and my body like a horse that is little, and you give it freedom to run. And when it wants to run away from you, you catch back. But he didn't do that. He exhausted himself in it. It may be also that his heart suffered from it. But he was an
Because
actor.
he died on stage,
On
didn't he, in
stage,
1965, yes.
He was a real actor and a good singer. His voice had a certain burr to it, which was very good for the role of Telramund.
Entsetzlich, die tönt aus deinem Munde, furchtbar, der Dame.
Ah, nennst du deinen Feind Gott? Warum willst du mir drohen, wie ein Feind Bist du so grimmig gedroht, denn jetzt dich in das Elend schickt?
Je schwächer ihr, desto gewalter kennt der Gotteskraft.
Say
That was an extract from the beginning of Act Two of Wagner's Lohengrin, the 1953 Bayreuth Festival performance, with Astrid Varnay as Ortrud and Hermann as Friedrich von Telramund, and the Bayreuth Festival Orchestra was conducted by Joseph Karlbert, a recording made in the Festspielhaus in Bayreuth in 1953. Astrid, presumably there's a lot of nonsense spoken about the damage that Wagner singing does to the voice. You yourself, having started on Wagner as a very young girl, went on and had one of the longest and most durable careers of any modern singer. But how did you protect your voice against excessive wear and tear?
Well, first of all, I kept it in good health. In other words, didn't go out and carouse after a performance. That's the most dangerous thing, because one has given of one's strength and then one overdoes. Anything that overdoes takes its toll. My mother was my mentor in that case, and my husband later, of course, took over. And we usually, after a performance at the Metropolitan, went home and had a very peaceful life. None of the going out amongst many people where there was smoking going on. All of these little things had to be looked after. It sounds very difficult, and it is difficult, because being a young person, one wants to have some fun too. But you can't have both. And that was the first thing that I had to do, is watch out for my health. The second thing is not to sing too often. And in rehearsal, sometimes to save one's voice in marking. Marking means actually that you give a half voice, or that you don't sing all of the high notes and not always the whole role. That is in between. You have to save yourself.
So you wouldn't advise a young singer to avoid Wagner roles too early?
No, I wouldn't. But of course there is one thing which one has to have. One has actually to have a Wagnerian voice, which means one has to listen to the professional person who says, yes, you have a Wagnerian voice, but in time.
Now, Ortrud requires formidable vocal and also acting abilities. You came out of an era when the great singers would stand and deliver.
Yes.
It was can belto, but there wasn't a great deal of sophistication in terms of the actual acting. What made you believe that you had to develop your powers as an actress as well as a singer?
I was dissatisfied with some of the singers just standing there and singing. I felt they should do something with the acting. There were a few people in the Metropolitan, I think of Risa Stevens, for instance, George London, Lawrence Tibbett, even Martinelli in his own way. And the smaller roles, strangely enough, acted more than the ones that were the big solo ones. It wasn't required of them. At that time, the Metropolitan had somebody do these sets. Somebody would just say, sort of like a traffic cop saying, you come in from the left and you go to the right, and sort of arrangements. And it was pretty much left up to the personality of the people who sang. And I was dissatisfied with this. I felt that the acting should have a good percentage of it. 50-50 would have been good. 60% of singing and 50% of acting, making 110 would have been even better. But as it just happens, I attended many plays in New York, and I also saw many good movies. And I thought, why can't the opera also have this? And I felt, if I were the Aida, or if I were the Elsa, how would I feel? How would I act? And I started feeling this acting quality in me. Mother had been a good actress. I found one thing was most important, which my singing companions, the majority, didn't do. They knew what the other person was going to say, and I made believe I didn't know what the next person was going to say. I was listening to them as if listening to their song for the first time, and therefore I was able to react. If one knows what is coming, one becomes lax. And I felt I have something in me. I wasn't aware of it, I must say. It was an instinctive thing.
The description singing actress is therefore one that you would welcome and consider a very great compliment. And that, if we're looking at the high points of your career, one would have to mention at this juncture Electra, which of course required all your powers as a singer and all your powers as an actress. And you performed that at the Salzburg Festival in 1964. Unfortunately, a very good recording exists under not only the musical direction, but the actual stage direction of Herbert von Karajan. Let's hear a little bit of that performance. This is the opening of Elektra, when, after some of the complaints about Elektra from the maids, she comes on, allein, alone.
Yes.
She's despairing of the death of her father, hating his murderers, of course her own mother, to complicate matters somewhat, wanting him to have the proper funeral that was denied him. I mean, it's an enormously difficult way to start an opera, don't you think?
Yes, this woman is living alone due to her own wishes not to be together with these people, her mother and her paramour, and evokes her father to come as a spirit to assist her in her revenge. I don't know if people realize that women in the Greek time were not able to take over any revenge. It was left to the men. And the mere fact that a woman dared to would have been a point in ousting her from their surroundings. So the fact that Oreste, her brother, was banished by the mother at an early age. Some legends say that Oreste was killed as a child and then was supposed to be killed as a child and then saved by foster parents and then brought back to avenge. And Oreste knows fully well that if he destroys his mother, he has to suffer for it too. This was the Greek way of thinking. And so what Elektra is doing is taking over the responsibilities of her brother until she re-finds him. And so it's a tremendous invocation, and she has refused childbirth, she has refused anything that a woman would want to have. And this makes her, of course, strong and at the same time fearful for the others. They can't break her spirit.
That was Elektra's monologue from the beginning of Richard Strauss's Elektra, Astrid Varnay with the Vienna Philharmonic, conducted by Herbert von Karajan, a live recording from the Salzburg Festival of 1964. Astrid, though you couldn't have anticipated it at the time, your decision to come to Bayreuth in the early 50s, and as we know you stayed there for 16 festivals, really marked your movement from America to a European base. Partly that was because of the decision of the Metropolitan Opera House under its new intendant, really not to use you as much as he might have done. Do you regret that New York never heard you in your absolute prime in Wagner roles?
Yes, in some respects, yes. Although I did the Elektra at the Metropolitan, and that was quite something. And then after that, Marcel had concerts in Cleveland and also in New York, where I did the Clytemnestra. But I do regret it a bit.
But Rudolph being a peculiar man, I think you were not the only one to suffer at his hands. Hans Hotter, who many of us will regard as perhaps the greatest baritone singer of the great Wagner roles, he was told only secondary roles in New York, so far as Bing was concerned.
Well, my collaborator in my memoirs called him up, and Hotter actually gave the information. I had heard rumors about how this happened. Mr. Bing felt that Mr. Hotter's time was over, and I was really amazed to hear that he was doing Hunding in Walkure, where another singer was doing the Wotan at the Metropolitan. And I said, but this is ridiculous. I mean, this is the great Wotan, and he is doing the smaller part. It wasn't small, but it was smaller in reputation. And Hotter felt unhappy about it, I'm sure, because he was being demoted for no reason at all, except we had sung in Bayreuth. Mr. Bing didn't like Wagner performances. He didn't like this. The sound of Wagner was anathema to him. But he had to give these performances and gave them as little as possible.
But you did finally get back to the Met.
I did come back to the Met, but Mr. Bing was not there. It was Mr. Juretsky who called me up and wanted me to do in the Janufa, the Küsterin, the sort of a stepmother of the Janufa.
Turning to Janacek just, I mean, the extraordinary thing about your career is your willingness, and secondly, your ability to, as it were, scale yourself down from the big heroic roles, and as you grow older, to take under your belt more and more character roles,
yes,
which actually has allowed you also, I think, to sing in some contemporary works that, people who want to pigeonhole singers wouldn't imagine you would have
I enjoyed
appeared
them.
in.
I really enjoyed them. Those cameo roles, which they say in America, I don't know whether they do in England, but I found that the smallest role could do something wonderful. I must say I'm terrible when I'm on stage with colleagues. If I like them, of course, I try to pare down my personality, but mostly I cannot be on stage without showing what I can do. And there were some secondary roles which were not really secondary. I mean, Clytemnestra is certainly not a secondary role, and neither is the Herodias. And the Janacek Janufa role was very big and very long and very difficult. And these roles gave me satisfaction. And what makes me happy is what I was doing. And I had about the same amount of time, almost, 20 years or 25 years added to.
See, I was going to say, you've been on the stage for more than half a century. I
Yes,
hate to say this,
years.
Indelicate, so one should mention it.
I started early.
Yeah,
It gave
but
me the
even,
advantage.
but it's one of the things, I mean, would you ever attempt a sort of summing up of the world of opera as you found it and as you now see it, goods and bads? I mean, are you more happy with the world of opera today than you were when you started? Has it lost something?
Yes, it has lost something, because I find that some of the direction has become a little bit too personalized by those persons trying to show their hang-ups and their, let us put it, they take their concept of themselves instead of the person who has created this for them. I don't say all of them. People have asked me whether certain operas were bad or not bad. I said, there is no such thing. In every presentation, it may be not acceptable, but there are some parts of it that are acceptable, because let us say the people who are really qualitative, people like Cornell, there was something that was wonderful that he created. There were some parts of the regie which, the direction which you might not have agreed to, but the overall was fine because he never destroyed the real core. I must say that at the end of it, I can say the dear Lord gave us free will. He also gave us free taste. And what you may like, I might not like. It depends.